Yes.
Big bucks in it?
Yeah. Don't use it all in one page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would be glad to take that training. so.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here again. Linda, it's nice to see you, meet you in person. Linda works with, or is the senior planner for the
Yes.
Ontario County Planning Department. She also staffs the county planning board. So I seen you on Zoom.
Oh, that's right.
I forgot. Yeah.
You mean she's not just flat on the screen?
It's really interesting to meet people that you only see on Zoom, like Greg Hotelling. I was like, oh, I didn't know you were that tall. So, I'm representing on form-based code. It's Uptown Canandaigua area, and that's kind of Doug's baby. He loves this project in this area, and I do too. And we both really love talking about it. Many of you are on the boards that will touch code, specifically planning board members up front here. Hopefully our newest zoning board of appeals member. So
Does everybody know each other in the room? Like, can we just do a quick
sure,
introduction?
yes. Start with
I'll start.
Amanda.
Hi everyone. I'm Amanda Van Lincoln.
And which board?
Planning board?
For Canandaigua.
Town of Canandaigua. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you
Go
for
ahead.
the.
I'm Scott Neal, I'm the planning board, Canandaigua as well.
I'm Edith Davey. I'm on the Environmental Conservation Board in the tree community of the town. And I thought, since I had not signed up for anything this time, this is a gap in my information. So great, wanting to learn.
I'm Shannon Chevier. I'm new, town of Canandaigua, and I expressed interest in the zoning board.
I'm Matt Horn with MRB Group. We provide planning and zoning and economic development services to the town.
He also is the executive
Like,
director
I
of
was
our
gonna say,
local
there's
development
more.
corporation, which is basically Uptown, what we'll talk about in a second, but anyway.
Tammy Warden, I recently moved from Canandaigua to Manchester. And now I'm on the Manchester zoning board of appeals, and I've been nominated to the planning board of Ontario County, so
Oh,
trying
great.
to get some information today.
I sit on the Ontario County Planning Board
Oh,
as a staff, but I'm also a resident here. So.
Yeah, so I mean, I lived in Canandaigua for 25 plus years, was very happy with my home, but we decided, you know, the kids are grown, time to have some land.
Great, great.
Spread our wings.
And here you may. Remember.
For being here.
And
And Linda.
I'm Linda Phillips,
Yeah.
the Ontario County Planning Board, so many of you read things that I write.
Yes.
So here you have to say about affordable housing.
Well, thank you all.
Everybody knows.
I am Shawna Bonshak, town of Canandaigua planner, so you'll find me here quite a bit. I'm also a resident of the town. Been here for 13 years.
And I'm Doug Finch, the town manager. Been with the town for first moved to Canandaigua in '95. So.
Oh, did you? I didn't know
Canandaigua
that.
Quite a
Okay.
while now. So we've seen any number of changes in Canandaigua over the years. So. I'm curious, so just kind of chat with you guys a little bit. What do you think form-based code? Let me just throw out some stuff. How would you describe it? What do you think it is? Any idea? And hopefully, by what do we have? 1:30, 1:50? Hopefully in the next 50 minutes, you'll have a different version by the time we end here. But does anybody have any idea what form-based code is?
My guess is some sort of sheet that they're organized by use maybe, and
Okay.
to make it easier for the residents to do some requests instead of just doing them.
Okay.
I don't know.
All right. Any other ideas?
Probably way far off.
No, that's good. That's good.
That is good.
It's very interesting. Let's talk about that.
Shannon, what do you think?
No idea. I think it has something to do with mixed use stuff.
Okay.
Okay. Karen, can I put you on the spot? What do you think?
I have no idea.
Edith, you've been down and
I have
involved
been
in
around
stuff.
forever. I'm really old.
I didn't say that. You did.
Well, as I say, I'm filling in gaps in my information here. I think it's probably has to do with concentrating development in places where the infrastructure is and making sure the infrastructure is concentrated where there is development or there's likely to be. And that would entail looking at all kinds of things like use, topography, ecosystems, the whole bit, looking at it.
Good, that's good. How many guys? Scott?
It's a form of zoning that's
You know what it
more,
is.
yeah. Twice I'm still.
If you send it
Right.
to you, you should have it, you know it, right?
When,
Right here.
when I found out that we were in this room to talk about form-based code, I was actually so excited because this is our working room, right? You look around the walls here. Every one of these maps on these walls tells me a story. And Matt has said this many different times, in many different meetings. He's like, I think Doug has a plan for every single parcel in the town of Canada, right? How many times have you say that? But the reason that I know that is because we've actually done 8 planning works over the last 8 years, and really digging into parcels and what should or shouldn't happen in the town of Canandaigua and what it looks like, and doing a whole series of visions. So before we even talk about form-based code, you look around this room, stuff out. We have a strategic forest protection area. That is this lower portion of the town of Canandaigua, right down in here. And so we know that there are very specific types of hardwood forested areas in this area. This also, when you're looking at the zoning map, to this map here, which you can see the gray area is our rural RR3, rural residential 3-acre minimum lot size. And then this light green area is what we call AR2, agriculture residential 2-acre minimum. Now that map corresponds to the map over here. This is our strategic forest or our strategic farmland protection area, right? And so this map, I can see these are the best soils, right? We are so blessed in the town of Canandaigua to have amazing soils that yield. So that's why, and I'm actually glad we have 2 planning board members here, and they're talking about solar in the other room. One of the things that we were very, very specific and strategic about when we adopted our solar law was the planning board is not able to grant a special use permit unless there's a finding that it's not a loss of viable agriculture land, right? We are the only municipality I know of that has that very specific requirement in there. Otherwise, you cannot grant a special use for solar. So we have this strategic farmland protection area with these very high quality soils, prime soils have drained. We have our Paddleford Brook Greenway. Paddleford Brook Greenway is a specific planning document that we did in 2015 that is references the 10,800 acres that is the Paddleford Brook Greenway. Paddleford Brook is a tributary middle of it. And again, that is some of our largest farming operations in the town of Canandaigua. And when we talk about agriculture and we talk about our agriculture enhancement plan that we did, large agriculture is best when it's next to each other, right? The farmer doesn't want to have to pull the plow up at the edge of the drive 3 miles down the road and put the plow back in again, right? And so if he can go from one parcel to the next and have prime soils, that is the most ideal, right? So then we have our steep slopes. We have that all mapped here, and this really becomes the workroom. We have our scenic view shed overlay here with the all of that are visible from Canandaigua Lake. In the back next to Linda there, that map that's right up in the middle with the green and yellow, that is our sewer capacity. That's every single sewer line in the town of Canandaigua is mapped. We actually know the size of each of those. There was a sewer master plan that we did. And then next to that, actually down below there is all of our water lines. And so we have all of our water lines mapped. So when you look at, and then by the way, up here, these 2 maps, these are all of our historic sites, our public and protected parcels over here. And then these are all of our lands of conservation value. So every single parcel in the town of Canandaigua between our open space plan and our agriculture enhancement plan has a parcel rating associated with it. The value of the land relative to conservation based on the type of soil it is, based on the development pressure, based on viewable from the lake or not. So every single parcel in the town of Canandaigua has a rating. So essentially, when you look and see, okay, if we want to protect the prime soils for the prime farmland. We want to make sure we're not putting sewer lines in the prime farmland. We know where the sewer lines are. We know where the water lines are. We know where the farm or the forest protection area is. The lands that have the highest ratings for conservation, we have our historic sites, we have our scenic views over there, and we have our steep slopes. We're like, okay, how do we keep development as much as possible out of all those areas? What's left? Uptown. That is essentially, this area right here is the area that's left. That is Uptown Canandaigua. So we started that process. Uptown basically, when I came to, and one of the reasons why I said in the late 90s is when I came to Canada, the town of Canandaigua at the time had put in some access roads for future development in that area. And those sat there for years and years and years and nothing happened with them. One of the things that we discovered is that the infrastructure was not in place to really support that. The sewer lines weren't capable of providing the support. But as the region started to grow and we really started looking at protecting this farmland, and we have our purchase and development right program and getting very serious about protecting our farmland and trying to keep the big developments out of the strategic farm area and put them someplace else, we kept coming back to this area where those access roads were, where some of that infrastructure was. And so we actually did we applied for a grant. We received a grant to do a feasibility study of that area specifically, and we call it the Uptown Feasibility Study. And that was really fun in identifying what that area could look like. And that area then got its own planning document and its own hard look at what that could become. Through that feasibility study in a couple of years that we worked on that, in really getting public engagement, developers really understanding the infrastructure, laying that all out, we came up with a plan. We adopted a plan. It's called the Uptown Feasibility Study. One of the action items for the implementation of that plan was the creation of something called form-based code. And one of the things that came out consistently is we don't want that area of the town to look like West Henrietta Road in Rochester. We don't want all the car dealerships, right? And I always said the absence of a plan gives you car dealerships. And my friend Randy Farnsworth isn't here today, thank God, but he's probably listening. I'll probably get a message. But in the absence of no plan, you're going to get a car dealership. So that was really why we came back to that area has to have a plan. That area, from that area to downtown Rochester is 25 minutes. We have a 4-lane highway there now. We have the infrastructure, we have the airport, the schools there, great things going for it. What could it become? And so we really started to dig into that. And we identified form-based code as specifically as an opportunity, a tool that would get us to the development of that. And so we took that hard look at this area specifically. In this area, I usually describe it from tops on the north side of the city of Canandaigua up to Randy's GMC dealership. Our good friend Randy Farnsworth, his GMC dealership is right there. And so we look at that area up to Emerson Road, essentially. Acoustos Technologies is up there, the airport over on the west side. Of course, we included North Road strategically, getting us to the academy, because we know that there's things that we have to do there relative to complete streets, and we continue to look at that. And the more that you have dense development, the more you have to accommodate all those different complete street aspects. So when we talk about development or not having more development, suburban sprawl in these other areas and focusing it on this area, that makes us really have to think about things that are more unique to a small city, even specifically for this area. You know, we've even had conversations about parking garages of things that otherwise you would never really think about. But as you're thinking about complete streets, sidewalks, and all those things, you really have to look at that. And then Shawna is going to go through some of the details of form-based code based on all that. So,
So I have a question for you.
yes.
Yeah.
So did you model that after somebody else who does that? And I think trying to do that, like North Carolina,
Mhm.
Charlotte area, they
Mhm.
have these little community towns that they have everything that the group of people would want in that area, from grocery stores to daycare centers to things like that. I mean, so.
So I don't want to answer that. I know the answer, but I don't want to answer that.
But it would.
Lake
I
Mary,
think
Florida.
we're missing some of that.
Lake
in
Mary,
these areas.
Florida is the
What
basis
was
for
it?
it. Lake Mary, Florida is
Okay,
the
Lake
basis.
Mary.
I was in Lake Mary, Florida, and that really is the basis
Yeah.
that we came up with for that, really kind of modeling.
I
of
did
that.
see that.
Mhm. Yep. Okay.
All right,
Did I do this?
so I really define the essence of form-based code as function and how buildings function with people. And you know, you kind of talked about urban and really it's a dense kind of walkable with multiple modalities, right? So you can you can walk, you can scooter, you can ride your bike, but you also can live where you work and you can shop where you live. It's very, very, I would say, user friendly. Euclidean zoning is what we're all used to. That was a question. You define form-based code versus Euclidean zoning. Euclidean zoning is what we're used to. It's
She
you
kind
know,
of got it right. She got the job.
I got it. Euclidean is standard. You know, you've got setbacks in the front, in the rear, the sides, coverage. That's it. You have a box you can work in. If you need a variance, you're going to go to the zoning board. That's how it works. It's not creative at all. Form-based code is really taking a building and looking at its function and stopping the segregation of uses. So in our uptown area now, you can have okay, but the example is you have retail on the bottom, you have residential on top. Everything is more dense. You can go higher, and in our form-based code district, you can go up to 35 feet. So you could do 3 stories. So you could do, you're saying this, and we need to do this, parking on the bottom, parking underground. And there is nowhere else in the town of Canandaigua where you could do this. We don't allow, excuse me, multiple uses on a parcel. You cannot, at this point, you cannot have residential and commercial together. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it.
We don't allow it anywhere else.
Right. Right. This is the only place that we allow multiple uses on a parcel. And almost no uses are, we have about 9 uses that are prohibited. Now with traditional zoning, it's very prohibitive. You know, you really don't intermingle, you don't commingle uses. This is very
examples because that you just jogged my memory, and that just everybody's familiar with RF collision, right? We'll use Randy as an example again because he's not here. RF collision is the old dealership, the old GMC dealership on Route 332, right? So he has this building, it's a 15,000 square foot building sitting here, right? And there's tons of all over the place that's underutilized currently, right? So for the last couple of years, we actually have, and I think I'll just say it. We have a Dunkin' Donuts that we've been working with for quite a while. We have a hotel that we've been talking to for quite a while. We have another facility. One of the challenges we constantly ran into before we had form-based code is you have 332 here, right? 332, and he has, as Shawna just said, we only allow 1 use on a parcel, and this whole entire thing is 1 parcel, right? So the only this for is the collision shop, even though it's a complete waste because it's totally underutilized, right? So what we had to keep looking at was getting creative. What could we do to allow more uses on this? You can't really get a variance for a use variance, so next to impossible to get, right? So then we had subdividing this property and what it would look like. So we were actually going to put a road, and some of you know I've referred to this before. I've called it Randy's Road, but there's another road that dead ends up here, and we were actually talking about putting a road in here so that he could subdivide this off and put in other uses, right? DOT said no. DOT would not allow us to bring the road out here to 332. They just said, absolutely not. We don't want another point there. What form-based code said is they said, form-based code says, okay, you can have those multiple uses on that same property. So now Randy's at all, it's just the driveway into the property, and he doesn't need any extra approvals. Form-based code is just, that's one example that she just jogged. It gives so much more creativity and flexibility for us to work with developers to try to get at whatever it is that we're doing.
So what does he do? Rent part of his property out?
Yeah, what a lot of people do are called land leases, long-term land leases. So they would enter into an equity agreement in that particular case. And so in this Dunkin' Donuts, Shawna's showing you some examples there. That Dunkin' Donuts that I've talked to him about is going to be a 2-story Dunkin' Donuts.
So the facade of a building becomes very, very important. Aesthetics are huge in form-based code. We have very strict, I would say, very strict requirements for transparency, meaning you need to be able to see through that building. A lot of windows, and a lot of different facade treatments.
Is it 65% transparency?
80%.
80% transparency.
80% in certain places. I would say that's probably 80%. Hugely important. Now, I wanted to talk about modality. So in this, I mean, obviously this is urban, but the way that 332 exists today, it's not welcoming. I used to work at Parkside Drive, and I would drive across the street to go over to town walls. I did, and I felt horrible. Like, what am I doing? What are you doing? But so that to be able to walk along through sidewalks, but it's not a welcoming. RF collision is not a welcoming environment.
Not only that, but what you're saying is it's a one-stop. So like, you're not encouraging people to visit multiple places, you're encouraging them to only go one place.
Right. So if you're creating, that's the ultimate goal of form-based code. It is dense, and that's actually not a bad thing.
Well, especially when you're talking about the protection of all these other areas. That's really the whole reason why we did that.
Yeah.
So the town of Canandaigua was 62 square miles. The city of Canandaigua was 4 square. The town of Canandaigua has 31 zoning districts. Just for some comparisons, I mean, the town of Canandaigua is huge. And for us, and with 10.5 miles of shoreline of Canandaigua Lake, and for us to be able to protect some of these other things, we have to have a spot for development to go, right? And so we can actually do more dense development here and also help protect those other areas, while also still supporting the tax base. Because, so for instance, the town of Canandaigua currently is assessed at $1.6 billion. That allows us to keep our tax rate at $1.03 per thousand. We're the lowest comparable communities to our size with 13,000 residents. And by quite a bit. When we talk about Uptown and we talk about the development, and Matt and I were working on a project last year that we submitted to the state $400 in new improvements and investments in Uptown with the development. So think about that. That pushes our tax rate up, or our assessed value up to $2 billion. That means for the foreseeable future, we should be able to sustain a tax rate of somewhere in that $1,000 range. Well, most municipalities are way up, but what's Geneva currently?
$18.26.
Oh, holy cow.
Thanks for throwing that.
That's nice.
Matt's the former Geneva city manager.
That's not nice.
So you had to obviously go and get that approved to change it.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that must have been a big deal.
It was a process.
It's
Yeah,
definitely
It was a
process.
process, but there was a lot of, we had a group of citizens with us through that process over years of nearly different committees that were engaged with us that really bought into the vision and helped understand the vision and what we were trying to do. Because it is, if you were just looking at the form-based code area and think, why are they doing all that development without knowing the rest of the story, that we're protecting the rest of the town, and that's this, that tells a different story, right? And so we had landowners that we met with, and we had many, many different work sessions with landowners, and they really started to get excited about this. And they have to do a pretty substantial investment too. I mean, my good friend Randy, he owns some of the multi in Uptown, right on 332 with all those car dealers. And I said to him, I want to do something completely different with your car dealers. You don't have one of those samples, do you, of the car dealerships?
Oh, with the
Carvana?
But no, not that.
Not
But it's
Carvana.
so it essentially
little
it brings the
boutiques.
buildings to the road, right? Like boutiques. So you go through a city, like I was just in Boston for a managers conference a couple of weeks ago, and there was a Tesla dealership right in downtown, and it was a storefront. You walk up, you look inside the storefront, you look in front of the glass, you see some Teslas, you walk in, you get to pick your colors, you can see screens, all computerized, play around, blah, 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 blah. There's not rows and rows and rows of Teslas sitting there. It's very, and that's the new model for the car dealerships. So when we start talking about all of that land up there that's currently car dealerships, and we start rethinking that. So
It would be
actually,
something like
it's
here.
right around the corner from this building was a
'Cause that's-
Tesla dealership, and the bottom of that with apartments and condos up above it.
Right.
Do we not, I mean, I think when I started researching this a little bit, in the city on the lake, we have the Abbots, we have the brewery, we have the apartment. It's sort of a mini
Yeah,
version of
absolutely.
this, because there's
Yep.
so many multi-use and you know, they
Yeah.
walk.
Yes,
Well,
it is walkable. Absolutely.
And that really becomes a big point to this too, is the walkability. That's why actually in the zoning, it requires, okay, you're gonna put in a restaurant, right? You have to have X number of, you have to have space for bicycles. You have to have the outdoor canopies, the outside seating is
Have to have
required.
those, yeah,
The
not to be
transparency,
required.
we really limit the number of car parking places and everything associated with code in that area for those reasons, because the goal here is, as Shawna was saying, you'll live, you'll work. You know, one of the big projects that we're working on, that the developer is calling it Uptown Landing. What their goal for that is, that 100 acres near Blue Heron Park, is their goal is for people to can play right there, where they would live on the site. They would go to work there on the site, on the other side of the site, in flex space buildings. They would have the park, there would be restaurants next to the park, on the back side of the park, in this whole area as that builds up. But that's going to take time. That's 5 years plus, as that all develops and everything. It's going to take some time. But the big thing is, and really for planning board members, it becomes critically important that when the developer says, you're gonna make me put a sidewalk in the nowhere, I don't want to do it. You say, do it anyway, or there's the door.
Right.
If
Absolutely.
anybody's traveled, they've been to other areas that have these, like Kansas City has a bunch of these
Mhm.
sections too.
Mhm.
And they're actually fabulous. I know.
Maryland's have many.
Well, the schools in Rochester tried to do it. RIT has Park Place that is,
Mhm.
they're on the corner, and then the U of R has the street down.
Yep,
Yeah.
Youngstown's a good example.
That's a
The
really good
Charlotte
example.
Pier, that's another example of form-based code for Rochester, that whole area. That was.
So how many people do you have targeted to live in that area? Like, do you have like numbers? I'm sure
We
you
do,
do, like.
we do. So it varies, and it depends on the landowner, right? So the landowner does have flexibility to build any number of different things, but you could easily have 2,000+ that's in that area. So, you know, if a unit has on average, just say it's not really 2, the national average is under that, right? I think it's 1 some or other, but anyway, just say that's 4,000 additional people in a community of 13,000 people. I mean, that comes, you know, interestingly enough, for the town of Canandaigua, I'll give you some numbers and some statistics. I'm a data guy. I look at a lot of data. A lot of people talk about our lakefront, right? We have 10.5 miles of shoreline of Canandaigua Lake. And I told you that number, $1.6 billion is our assessed value, right? And take a guess at how much the lakefront is assessed for. Total is 1.6 billion. Just take a guess. These are huge numbers, I know. Let's thread a number. How much?
80%.
80%. So you think it's, just say 1.2. Okay. You think it's
20 will.
okay. So now let me tell you actually what it
It's
is.
gonna surprise you.
500,000.
It's
Fine, really nice.
400 million.
It's not much.
It's only
Really?
400
Wow.
million. That entire lakefront, that 10.5 miles of shoreline, the town's total assessed value at 1.6 billion, that lakefront is 400 million. And that's not to discount that, that is important. But I just told you, when Matt and I submitted the DRI application last year, we submitted 400 million in improvements. It's like us having a whole nother lakefront in Uptown. That's what we need to be thinking. And so the most recent census data actually showed that 52% of the town of Canandaigua currently lives south of 5 and 20, along the lakefront, those housing developments, et cetera, et cetera. 52%. That means 48% lives north of 5 and 20. And then when you Uptown, it's going to flip the other way. You're actually going to have more residents north of 5 and 20 than south of 5 and 20. So a lot of times we get super hyper focused on that lakefront, and that is important in the protection of the lake. Don't get me wrong, but that's a piece to the puzzle. And there's many pieces to the puzzle down in Canandaigua. I went off, sorry. but
It's good, it helps paint the picture, it really does.
It's 4,000 people, 4,000 new residences
Yes.
without giving up a grain of active farm soil.
Right.
Give up a tree from a strategically forested or a
Right.
strategic forest land. That's huge.
It is huge.
It is huge.
Yeah, and you always hear, I mean, all you gotta do is be on Facebook for 5 minutes and people are looking for housing.
Right.
So
Oh,
like,
yeah.
there's a great need for housing in this area, so,
Yes.
for sure.
Really, Matt is leading a committee, a task force for us on housing and specifically affordable housing and this area having the flexibility that it has. That's a big piece of that
Right,
as,
right.
as we look at those.
We're looking at developers who are putting in apartment townhomes, single family, it's a mix.
And then part of the whole thing that we did with the Uptown Feasibility Study when we originally launched that in 2017 was really looking at the infrastructure, also the transportation, right? The road, what could that hand can you get in a drive commute? You know, that's why I say 25 minutes and you're in downtown Rochester under the big welcome to downtown Rochester from Uptown, and really bringing those pieces together. But we also did analysis of like office space, what the current demands were, what the current supply, everything. And then March 2020 came along, and COVID changed everything, right? So we kind of ripped that part out of the feasibility study and threw it away. Because that really did change. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see as we go forward, where originally we thought in Uptown there might be more office space. I think it's more going to be, you'll have some mixed uses, but you're not going to have the demand for office space that we had pre-pandemic because so many people are able to work remotely and working from home.
But we still need that flex space, that's what you're saying.
Yes, we definitely need the flex space. Matt and I work from an economic development perspective with an entity called GR Rochester Enterprise, and that's one of the big things is that flex space, that 15,000 square feet, 15,000 square feet of flex space that's available that could theoretically maybe be a first floor, it could be a light manufacturing, it could be light industrial, it could be light anything with a mixture of residential in the upper levels. Becomes absolutely critical. But then we really have to also understand the infrastructure. And I know Matt's tired of me talking about this, but when we talk about economic development lately, you can't talk about economic development without talking about infrastructure, water, sewer, gas, electric. What's the supply of electric coming into this area and how many megawatts can we provide at a specific site? When we talk about rail becomes a big part of this. Pactiv is in this area. Pactiv is the largest private employer in all of Ontario County, and they use rail. And then understanding, can we expand rail lines or not? What spurs could we maybe look at for our industrial portion of this? Can you go back to that other map? Because that when it has the Uptown map, that becomes really critically important because we have this based code, and maybe Shawna, you can talk about the specific, the commercial form-based code and the mixed-use form-based code. But we also have this other area just outside of our form-based code area here, the industrial area, and we have a mixed-use overlay over there, and that's over near the airport. And here's here, and then we've got Artisan Meats here. We've got Acustos up a little bit further in that purple section, but those become also critically important because this is where a lot of different pieces come together. And really what we tried to do with the mixed use or the Uptown feasibility plan was transition it in, right? So 332 is a traffic corridor. That's all about moving people. But then you get off of 332 and 332 may transition back in 2 or 3 story buildings that may transition back, maybe some apartments, but then it transitions. So if you're looking at a skyline, transitions down again to like townhomes and those types of things before you eventually get back a little bit farther into the single family residential. So we put all that into the Uptown feasibility study, and we actually designed this Uptown form-based code. So it actually has 2 main components to accommodate that, being the commercial corridor and the mixed use corridor.
Yes, absolutely. So the commercial corridor is exactly what you would expect, and that's the 332 kind of sliver. I wish we had a map.
Well, you zoom up there.
Yeah. So this is our newest zoning map update, very exciting. So you've got the 332 right here. So that's the pink. And then we've got the other parcels in the back here,
Which is the mixed use.
the mixed
area.
use overlay. So the uses that are prohibited are basically the same, but for what's developable and how it builds out are a little bit different. Is there any questions?
Well, let me tell you an example of that, right? So I had a developer call me a couple of months ago, just as we're adopting form-based code, and then we created a business improvement district to support the area, and we're going through all this process, and we're all excited about this. And this developer calls me and he says, I'm buying a piece of property right on 332 and I want to do mini storage, right? And the hair on the back of my head goes straight up and I'm like, oh, please call somebody. John Goodwin calls somebody else. And he's like, no, I'm looking at it. And I'm like, and I started to say no, and I'm like, wait. Form-based code. And it's a mindset for all of us, right? So that image that Shawna showed you of that nice looking building right on the corner. What do I care if he does mini storage on the inside of the building, as long as the building looks like that, right?
Right.
Do whatever he wants on the inside, I don't care. So he can have indoor mini storage on the building, as long as the outside of the building looks like that. So I showed that to him and he's like, oof, you made that more. I'm like, okay, but do you want it or don't you? And he's like, maybe, and so then it's really rethinking that area, especially that 332 corridor area, before you get back into these other areas and really kind of thinking about the different perspectives. The mixed use overlay area just on both sides of the form-based code currently. Whether or not we continue to allow those to exist, we have to figure that out going forward. But this form-based code area specifically is the 332 corridor off the two sides, and then the mixed use area back near Blue Heron Park as you get back into there more. So has everybody seen this? Can you see? We can pass this around.
The one thing I don't think we've talked about or mentioned is parking. Parking is no longer permitted in the front of a building. And that's huge. I mean, significant. That, every building needs to be pushed up 10 feet is the
Right, so
setback.
let's use our example, tops.
Tops.
So tops, the town made tops build exactly the way it is.
Yeah, absolutely. You need enough parking this eve, right? Or the day before Thanksgiving. 2 days a year, you're putting in 10,000 spots.
Right.
Whatever.
Even made tops put in that traffic, like to control all that Christmas.
Yeah, the
traffic.
Christmas traffic and then, so how much of that parking lot do they use? A quarter,
I mean,
maybe,
ridiculous,
so tops, they came in today, would be up against the road, like the Wegmans up on, up by, and yeah. It literally is on the sidewalk, right? The parking is on the side, I think, basically, when you pull in.
Yeah.
They have underground or no?
I don't think they have underground there.
Actually, we do. It's
Do
not,
they?
I don't know if it's under the building, but it
But it
is.
is. There.
Well, it must be under some kind of
Down.
the building.
Yeah. They do in other
Like it might be
cities.
under their sort of office
Brooklyn.
space.
Whole
Oh,
Foods does that all the time. They have the one in
Underground.
Baltimore. It's underground. You take an elevator up and shop and
Yep.
it's really cool with your cart and elevator and fun stuff like that. But yeah, so parking is on the side or in the rear
Really,
and it's
I'm
also
practicing
landscaped.
this as you guys do.
Trees
Yes.
and ways for people to walk safely through parking lots.
I'm surprised the Tops has never done the land lease in front. To put some businesses in there. Would that be allowed?
So you know what's
They
funny?
have that
It would be
down
down,
there.
but
I
you know,
know. It's been
but you
there
know what
forever.
happened there with that? Just so you, again, it was the town that said no for years and years and years. Tops wanted to put stuff up there and the town said no. Tops actually had plans to put a whole gas station there and the town said no. Town that time after time after time said no. And they kept trying and trying and trying. And so that's, you talk about a game changer. I mean, it's like we went from here to here, or however you want, or there to there, whichever. I mean, it's huge. Form-based code changed this significantly versus what was really not happening. in this
Right.
area.
It is wasted space. Absolutely. It's
So now
wasted
today,
land. It's ugly
yes,
space.
they
It
could
is
build a
ugly
whole new
space.
building. Yeah.
The integral truck parks and everything.
Yes.
Business billboard.
Mhm.
All the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Shawna mentioned trees. That does really become, especially for your planning board members,
Yes.
as you're looking at the projects, right? And the development that comes in, the landscaping does become critical, you know, following, making sure it feels warm and friendly and welcoming and vibrant
Safe.
with this. Right, and those vertical elements. So we used to talk about something all the time called traffic calming. And what they always told you was traffic calming, you should do vertical elements, trees, flowers, planters, even restrict the lines of the lanes of traffic from 12 to 10 and 11 feet to make it tighter so that people slow down. That all becomes so important as you start to develop a more dense area like this. And so we continue to struggle and we continue to try to work with DOT on State Road 330. So we continue to work through those things. But anytime at all, we're looking at anything on any of these side roads, access roads, Parkside Drive, Summers Drive, Fire Hall Road, North Road, any of those are all town roads. We can make those changes. And so we really have to look at those traffic calming aspects, those landscaping, the vertical elements, the trees, the flowers, the lighting, the technology. And this really, Uptown has the ability to become almost like the new technological destination area, right? You know, they actually have streetlights now that we can install. The highway superintendent and I have been talking about for this area that'll actually continuously monitor the weather. They will actually send out notifications if there's ice. It continuously reads the pavement. We'll send out notifications. Hey, there's ice in this area. You need to come put down salt. You need to come plow it. You need to whatever. Time and temperature. Streetlights actually provide Wi-Fi capabilities and expand the Wi-Fi service. So imagine in this area as you start to live and you live in one of these new buildings that are being built, but yet you have community free Wi-Fi, right? Think about how huge that gets, or the coffee shop so the college students can. And we start to blend all these things together. Matt and I, from an economic development perspective, we're talking with one of the new tenants coming into one of the new buildings in Uptown. And he was talking about the importance. Did he say they have a lightologist on staff? Yeah. Right? Isn't that what he said? And the importance of, right? But it was something that was like mind blowing, right? And so then you think about lighting and like even the street lights and the accent lights and how with technology you can start to shape the way people even travel and shop and everything. And as we design that into, if it's October, we could light the poles pink, right? And honor of breast cancer awareness. Or if we have a big event going down at the lakefront, right? And working with the city, we could have street lights that all had similar accent lighting all the way down to try to direct people in areas. So that's stuff that business is doing that government hasn't done to this point, but this area is like ripe for that kind of stuff, for those new ideas and new concepts and everything. I get excited.
We have to,
about it.
you always
So-
do. It is exciting. We have, oh no,
We
I
got a
was
few
looking,
minutes.
well, I was looking at, I should look at my watch, not the. Do you have, are there questions? Because we love to talk about them.
We never even got to the presentation, did we?
No. There's so many things.
What does it mean for the current owners? Like, were they aware that these things were changing?
Absolutely.
Like, did you have to get their buy-in? Like, how much work was that?
Years.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
they've
been
been involved with the
involved.
process from the very beginning. So
Yeah.
that was really when we started to do the Uptown feasibility study. There's actually a photo somewhere floating around, I think maybe in the study, that actually we had a huge meeting and the overwhelming majority of these landowners came to that meeting. And then we actually had community stakeholder meetings. So we actually specific areas in Uptown. We went around holding different meetings. We met over at the Liberty Square Apartments multiple times where they have a meeting space there. We met at the school bus garage over on Airport Road. We walked on multiple nice days. We walked up. You would never know it, but that traffic light that you're talking about, we walked across
I
that.
know,
It
I've
only
heard that
takes
story.
12 seconds to get across that street, and the countdown gives you 45. You've got more than enough time to safely walk across that road, but the perception
It's
is
the
you don't,
perception.
right? So
Absolutely.
that's where we introduce the vertical elements and all of those types of things. It becomes so important, or the safe medians and those types of things. So yes, we did have just a tremendous amount of citizen engagement, but really that was led primarily by, yes, we had projects, but a number of years ago, we created something called our Citizens Implementation Committee to really implement each of the goals of our comprehensive plan. And Shawna heads that up for us. And that group, they're all rock stars.
They're amazing.
8 years now, they've met every other week and continuously advance the objectives of our comprehensive plan.
So as a more review oriented, what we'll do in my office, development office, is there's thresholds for current business owners. So if 25%, for example, and they want to expand, then they'll be fine, and they can expand within the I guess the old zoning.
Yep.
But anything over 25 kicks the form-based code into place, and they would have to do the current code.
And there are many, many times where I pick up the phone and the developer says, I was driving down Route 21 and I think that little piece of property right there would be perfect for a housing. And I say, no, but if you look at Uptown, happy to work with you. And it usually gets them fired up for a few minutes and then they realize, hey, okay, this is actually easier to go work in this area that they designated for development that has the infrastructure and everything.
Absolutely.
Is the infrastructure all in place
It
at
is.
this point? Because I was looking at that map and then trying to look at those.
Yeah. So the county, and Linda's here from the county helped us with a huge problem that we had in that area about 4 or 5 years ago, and invested $1 million in a new force main that had to be upgraded on Fire Hall Road. And when they did that, that allowed most of Uptown drains gravity back to a pump station that then goes through that force main. And so that really took care of that issue. Now we're still trying to demands, right? So we had a business that we were recently talking to that was looking to come in this area, and they needed almost 1 million. It was 800 and some odd thousand gallons of water a day. And so we had, and okay, we at first I submitted it, I made a pitch for it, and then I was like, ooh, we don't have the ability to provide that, right? So there are still some limitations, and we're continuously working through that. We're working through that with Matt and MRB. We're doing the whole analysis, but the basic support this stuff is here. This has been many years of planning to get it to this point. So.
I guess I was way off on my thought.
But you know what? At the end of the day, we're off because there actually is form-based code. It essentially says, okay, this is the form that the buildings are going to be.
Okay.
Here's the way you do it. There's actually a document, and you can pretty much do most anything you want, including mini storage.
Right.
And
I'm
it's on
looking
the
at mini
inside.
storage and stuff.
Looks like there'll be a lot of demand on Blue Parrot Park
Mhm.
Yes.
at some point.
Mhm.
Are there plans for enhancement in any way, or is it still going to be the open field?
Are we talking about-
Stormwater pond type thing that is there now?
Well, so Blue Heron Park is very interesting. It serves many, many different purposes. The purpose that you just mentioned that most people don't realize is those ponds
What it
are
was.
actually 332 drainage district. That's actually where everything from the highway actually goes under those ponds. So we actually put a sign out because people started fishing out there. We actually put a sign in just to catch and release. But to answer your question, so is very, very involved. They understand this. We're continuously monitoring this, especially that 100 acres that's adjacent to Blue Heron Park, and working with the landowners. And we've really been talking about, as they bring plans into the planning board over the next couple of months, as they bring in trying to incorporate some of those same aspects into the park. So it's seamless. You know, I would envision that Blue Heron Park is never going to be a park like Outhouse. Outhouse is geared towards kids. I just came by Outhouse. I had a meeting over that way about an hour ago, and the is full.
It's a swarm.
It's just absolutely full right now, right?
Someday
That's-
it'll be even more full.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
But Blue Heron Park will never be that. Blue Heron Park, I envision that more as, it's a leisurely park. Yes, there's the disc golf there and everything, but it's a park go for a walk, they can get
Right.
outside, enjoy
Yeah.
fresh air, maybe some plantings, maybe some community gardens, doing those types of things.
Some big trees would be nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, there's not a lot
Poplar or
of
something
shade.
like that,
But,
yeah.
but the developer, we've had some preliminary conversations as they build about for community space, community centers and those types of things that they are actually incorporating into their development because their development is so dense adjacent to the park. So then when you think about that, if the residents that are eventually going to live there are actually, that's taken care of built in, and you've got restaurants on the edge of the park, what does it matter if somebody gets a glass of wine and goes for a walk around the pond, and, just enjoys themselves on a nice Friday evening or something, so. But all of that stuff is actually spelled out in the form-based code. Really, the planning board, you guys are our last line of defense for that. Shawna and I can yell at the developer all day long, but if they come to you and they say, oh, I don't want to do that, and you guys don't make them do it, I got nowhere to go.
Right, and we don't want to send them. We really don't. We want them to work with us.
It's really empowering too for a planning board. I mean, the market forces at work in Canandaigua make developers want to be here, right? So investors want to put money in Canandaigua. And then a clear direction from the local government saying it's okay to say no. It's actually as important to say no as it is to say yes, sometimes more important. And a lot of municipalities I work in, it's very murky for a plan. They kind of have to wander around wondering what the city council really wants. In this case, it's clear and you're clearly empowered to do the right thing, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah, an application too.
We have two sketch plan applications, which is, I think, how these will go down because, look, for instance, the 100-acre parcel it's a monster. It's huge. It's huge. It's a new
It has
community.
many different uses.
There's
I
so
mean,
many facets.
Does it still have row houses in it, which I think is cool?
It does. It has
It's
row
got
houses.
all kinds of
It's
different
got
stuff in it.
everything.
Yeah.
And then we have another sketch plan for something on a smaller scale, with residential, commercial, and play areas.
Do you have quick access to that, to Canandaigua Crossing? That rendering, do you have that handy? Good show. If that's okay if you don't. One of our, it's not really officially a form-based
Yeah, I got it.
code project, but the Canandaigua
Really?
Crossing project that some of you may remember that you worked on it. That's the new building that's going in next to Tom Walls, right on 332. Construction right now, the forms are up out of the ground. They were actually up there working when I came by today.
Yeah.
But that is kind of the first, it's not exactly form-based code. It came in under the old zoning and, we had to get variances and kind of work through. But it's the first real project that starts to advance us towards form-based code. And so that one was interesting. I think I remember talking to many different zoning board members saying, hey, in this particular case, could you grant this variance? Right.
What is
It
it
was
proposed
right
to
in
be?
the middle of.
Yes, it was
form
during
base
all the
getting ready to-
It
transition.
was literally like on the edge.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And what is the plan for that?
Canandaigua Crossing is a mixed-use building that will have multiple tenants in it. It's a lot of
Just Google it, 'cause
transparency. Yeah, they
There's actually some.
it'll have on the one end, Full Send is moving into it, retail. In the middle, O'Callahan's Irish Pub is moving into it that has second floor outdoor rooftop dining. That is interesting enough. What I love about their design that the architect came up with that, it's outdoor rooftop dining that is covered by like a trellis that's supposed to have green and greenery growing on it and everything, so to extend the life of it a little bit. And then on the other end, I think there's more retail space on the
There
one end.
is.
So, but
This was a bad article, but I think there's a.
does it have the photo? Interestingly enough, Shawna and I had a call last week from somebody that's affiliated with that project that was looking for additional space.
Yes.
And I immediately said, why don't you just add an extra level to it? You can still go up another, and they were like, what? But that particular one is is that article? Let's look at that.
The one article, I wanted to do the groundbreaking.
Maybe. images,
Keep looking.
maybe images on Google, click
Yeah.
images and see if it comes up. But it's a more modern, has a lot of transparency associated with it. It's got like a sloped roof and everything, but it's
Yeah.
just a more modern design and everything, so. But you can see there's actually next to Tom Walls, if you go up to Tom Walls on 332, Tom
Oh,
Walls
see, it was
obviously,
this- okay.
yeah, but that's our
That was
ground.
the article. Yeah, but that's when, that
Yeah,
article.
right. There we are. There we were freezing that day. That was cold. That was like the day of the winter, I think, that day. But if you go up next, if you go to Tom Walls, there's actually a small billboard out there that actually has a picture of it and everything right there associated with it. So it's pretty cool looking. I think, is it on the project somewhere?
No, it's not. We moved
Oh,
it,
okay.
that's all. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, all right. That's all right. We'll see it. Any other questions? We're about out of
I
time
thought it
here,
was-
so.
Yeah, well, I'll just say, I know a lot about this form-based code, but I was also revisiting Ontario County did an age-friendly planning process and encouraging, county municipalities to think about that. And sort of sitting here today randomly, really, like, this is a place where you could get the mixed use, that older adults could live, they could be able to walk, they could be able to socialize, which they, affordability and appropriate housing is sort of the first step. And then, being able to get out and